All right, so let's dive into something I'm sure a lot of you are thinking about. Is it too late to buy Bitcoin? I mean, we've all heard the stories about people who got in early, right?
hmm
But Bitcoin's price, well, it's been a bit of a roller coaster, so how do we even figure this out? Well, today we've got these two really interesting perspectives. One's from Ben Carlson over at A Wealth of Common Sense, and the other is from Bitcoin Magazine,
And they really come at this from like completely different angles.
which I think makes this deep dive so interesting.
Yeah, totally. What's really interesting to me is how they both kind of tap into this very human thing, this FOMO, that fear of missing out.
Oh, absolutely.
So Carlson, in his article, it's called "Is It Too Late to Buy Bitcoin?"
Okay.
He uses this really great historical example to illustrate this. It's about Sir Isaac Newton and the South Sea Bubble.
Ooh, I love a good history lesson,
Right.
especially when it involves somebody as brilliant as Newton. But tell me more about this Bitcoin connection.
Okay, so Newton, despite being, a genius, he got caught up in this speculative frenzy around the South Sea Company.
Okay.
He bought in, made a profit, and then, get this, he jumps back in at a much higher price when he saw other people getting rich.
Oh, no. Classic FOMO.
Exactly. And he ended up losing a fortune when the bubble burst.
So even the guy who practically invented calculus couldn't resist the allure of FOMO.
Right.
What's Carlson saying this means for us regular folks who are thinking about Bitcoin today?
Well, his point is that human psychology hasn't really changed all that much since Newton's time.
Yeah, makes sense.
He asks, like, why would someone suddenly be interested in Bitcoin at, say, $100,000 when they weren't at all interested at $20,000?
Yep.
He suggests the sudden urge is often driven by emotion, by that FOMO, rather than a well-thought-out strategy.
That is a really good point. It's so easy to get caught up in the excitement, especially when you see those huge gains.
Oh, absolutely. And while Carlson acknowledges that, yeah, Bitcoin could go even higher, he really warns against making impulsive decisions based only on the price movements. Like, are you driven by logic and research? Or are you just chasing those quick riches?
Right, so it's not just about whether Bitcoin will go up or down. It's about why you're buying it and when.
Exactly. Timing the market is super difficult, and emotional decision-making, well, that can lead to some costly mistakes.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, he's not saying to avoid Bitcoin altogether. He actually suggests a strategy called dollar cost averaging, especially for those who are new to crypto.
Okay, I've heard of dollar cost averaging,
Mhm.
but how does that work in practice? Especially with something as volatile as Bitcoin.
Well, it's basically a way to reduce risk by spreading your investment over time. So instead of investing a big lump sum at the current price, which might be, at a peak,
Yeah.
you invest smaller amounts at regular intervals, no matter what the price is doing.
Okay.
So you kind of average out your purchase price and reduce the impact of those big price swings.
So let's say you decided to invest like $50 a week in Bitcoin. Some weeks the price will be higher, some weeks lower, but over time, you're riding out those waves.
Yes,
That
yeah.
you're potentially getting a more stable return.
Yep. It's kind of like taking the stairs instead of trying to jump to the top floor in one go.
I love that analogy.
Right.
That makes the whole concept so much less intimidating.
Right.
So Carlson's approach is definitely more cautious. It's like dipping your toes in the Bitcoin world, right?
Yeah.
But we have that other article, remember, with a completely different perspective.
Yeah, totally different. Before we get into that, though, have you ever thought about investing in Bitcoin, even just a tiny bit?
I have. It's hard to ignore all the hype, right?
Mhm.
I even downloaded a crypto app once, but then I saw the price charts and kind of got overwhelmed.
I get it. Bitcoin can seem pretty wild. But what if there were data-driven strategies to, like, navigate that volatility? That's what Bitcoin Magazine argues in their article, Why It's Not Too Late to Invest in Bitcoin. They have a much bolder stance. They use a lot of data and analysis to make their case.
Oh, that's interesting. So they're addressing the elephant in the room,
Yeah.
Bitcoin's price history head on.
Totally. And they're doing it with numbers. They even have this tool, it's called DCA strategies, and it lets you play around with different dollar cost averaging scenarios for Bitcoin.
Oh, interesting. So this DCA strategy, it seems to be a recurring theme here. It must be pretty important.
It is, especially for long-term investors. Bitcoin Magazine argues that trying to time the market, buying low and selling high, is super difficult, even for experienced traders.
Okay.
They believe that with a DCA approach, you're less focused on those short-term price swings and more on the long-term potential of Bitcoin.
Okay, I'm starting to see the appeal of DCA. But I'm still curious, what kind of data are they using to support these claims about Bitcoin's future?
Well, they use their DCA tool to compare Bitcoin's performance to like more traditional assets.
Okay.
Like you can see how it stacks up against, gold, the Dow Jones, even Apple stock, and
Right.
you can look at all different time frames.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, it kind of puts things in perspective, especially if you're more familiar with the stock market.
Yeah, for sure.
And spoiler alert, Bitcoin, according to their data, comes out on top.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So for
Yeah.
example, they say if you invested just $25 per week in Bitcoin, over the past 6 months, you would have turned like $675 into almost 986%.
Wow.
That's a return of over 46%.
Yeah, that's significant.
Yeah. And gold during that same time only gained about 5.8%.
Hmm.
And it gets even more interesting when you look at longer time frames.
That,
They did the analysis for 1 year, 2 years, even 4 years. And in each case, Bitcoin consistently outperforms the other assets, often by a huge margin.
that's pretty compelling data.
Right.
It makes you think maybe people who dismissed Bitcoin as just a fad were a little too quick to judge.
It definitely makes you think.
Yeah.
But, beyond just past performance, they also point to Bitcoin's market cap
Okay.
as a key indicator of its future potential.
Okay, remind me, what is market cap again?
It's basically the total value of all the Bitcoin that's out there in circulation.
Right.
Like if you wanted to buy every single Bitcoin that exists,
Yeah.
the market cap is what it would cost you.
Right. Okay, got it.
So how does Bitcoin's market cap compare to, those other assets we talked about, like gold or the entire stock market?
Yeah.
Well, that's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
Bitcoin's market cap is still pretty small compared to like those giants.
Okay.
And Bitcoin Magazine is saying this means there's still a ton of room for growth, especially as, more institutions, maybe even governments, start adopting it.
So they're basically saying Bitcoin's still in its early stages, like the internet was in the 90s.
Yeah,
Before everyone realized how big it would be.
that's a good analogy.
Yeah.
They even say that like if Bitcoin were to reach the same market cap as gold,
Okay.
which is, trillions of dollars,
Right.
the price of a single Bitcoin could be over $900,000.
Wow.
They even mention, I think it was Eric Trump who predicted Bitcoin would hit $1 million.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, those are some bold predictions.
Yeah.
I always take predictions with a grain of salt, but it's definitely something to think about.
It is. It really highlights the contrasting views on Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Some people still see it as this, speculative asset like digital gold.
Right.
And others think it has the potential to completely change, disrupt traditional finance
Yeah.
and maybe become a major global currency.
I have to admit, I'm starting to see both sides. Yeah. But even with those potential gains, we can't forget about the volatility, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Bitcoin has crashed pretty hard in the past.
Oh, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
It's important to remember that, past performance isn't a guarantee of future results.
Right.
Bitcoin has shown some amazing growth,
Yeah.
but it's also had some dramatic drops, like you said.
Yeah.
So any investment in cryptocurrency has to be made knowing the risks involved.
So it's back to that balance of like informed optimism
Yeah,
and healthy skepticism.
exactly.
What other risks should we be thinking about?
Well, one thing to remember is that Bitcoin isn't the only cryptocurrency out there.
Right.
There are literally thousands of others,
Oh, yeah.
each with their own complexities and potential problems.
Yeah, it's a whole world.
It is.
Yeah.
It's easy to get lost in all the hype and make, impulsive decisions.
Right. Especially with so many options.
Exactly. It's like exploring a new country.
Okay.
You wouldn't just arrive at the airport and wander around aimlessly. You'd do some research, plan your route, pack the right gear,
Right.
Investing in cryptocurrencies needs that same kind of mindset.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
So research, assess the risks, have a plan. It sounds like we're getting close to wrapping up this deep dive.
Yeah.
So where do we stand? We've explored these two very different perspectives on the too late to buy Bitcoin question.
Right.
Carlson is urging caution. He's drawing parallels to those historical bubbles.
Yeah.
While Bitcoin Magazine is saying Bitcoin is a superior investment with massive growth potential. What are your final thoughts on this?
I think what's really interesting is that both sides actually offer something valuable.
Yeah.
Carlson's point about human psychology, the dangers of FOMO.
Right.
That's so important, especially with something like crypto where there's so much hype.
Yeah, absolutely.
But then on the other hand, just dismissing Bitcoin completely, just because it's been volatile in the past or because of its price right now, Well, you might be missing out on its potential for real disruption and innovation, like Bitcoin Magazine is saying.
So it's not about just blindly picking a side.
Right.
It's more about taking those insights and figuring out how they apply to you, your own goals,
Yeah,
your own risk tolerance.
exactly. There's no easy answer to the too late question.
Right.
It all depends on you, your individual circumstances, and how well you understand the opportunities and the risks.
Bitcoin Magazine really pushed that data-driven approach, especially with dollar cost averaging.
Yeah.
Have you ever thought about using that in your own investing?
I think dollar cost averaging can be really useful, yeah.
Okay.
Especially for something like Bitcoin, which can be so up and down. It helps to take the emotion out of it and encourages a more disciplined approach for the long term.
So it's about focusing on the bigger picture,
Hmm.
not those day-to-day changes.
Exactly. And that goes back to what both articles were saying. Do your own research, figure out how Bitcoin fits into your overall investment strategy, if at all.
So the key takeaway here is, educate yourself. Think critically.
Mm-hmm.
Don't just get swept up in the hype, whether it's positive or negative.
Exactly. Find that balance.
Yeah.
Informed optimism, but also healthy skepticism.
Well said. So for all of you listening who are still wondering, is it too late to buy Bitcoin?
Right.
I hope this deep dive has given you some things to think about.
Definitely.
There's no right answer for everyone. It's all about knowing your goals, your risk tolerance, and doing your homework.
And remember, things can change fast, like with the South Sea bubble or Bitcoin's own price history.
Right.
What matters is that you make your investment decisions with a clear head and a well-informed perspective.
Thanks so much for joining us for this deep dive into Bitcoin. Until next time, keep those minds curious, those questions flowing, and remember, knowledge is power.